Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Sorry about that. I was a little bit delayed. Yeah, that was weird that the music was going through, but not the but not my voice. You know, there's always something here with OBS, and we'll figure it out eventually. I promise. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry about the little bit of a late start. I don't know how many people we're even going to have today, but we are here, and we're here to answer your questions here on Night's Last Call. So it's a Gamemaster Q&A stream. So basically, whatever it is that you guys want to talk about, let me know. You can go ahead and ask questions. Make sure to preface it by doing the question in caps before your question. That way I can find it easily in the chat. And if you're interested in supporting us and getting to the top of the line, feel free to use a super chat or a Stream Elements tip. Both are appreciated, and that will make sure that I definitely get your question answered and also have a lot of appreciation. We're also trying and experimenting out with some new elements here. We had this last time, but up in the left-hand corner we have the Hype Boss. It starts off with Night's Last Call is the boss at mere 25 hit points, but if someone super chats or tips, that'll do damage to the boss, and if you kill the boss, you become the new Hype Boss. I'm really just experimenting with this and just seeing how this works, but I'm thinking about maybe creating some fun games with this, maybe some prizes for someone who is the Hype Boss at the end of a stream or something like that. Some giveaways. I don't know. We'll figure out something. But yeah, sorry. I just kind of feel like I've been running around all week and not quite prepared as I usually am. So yeah, we can hang out. This stream is for you. Doesn't look like we had that many people here today, but hopefully we'll get this figured out. All right. Hey, Damian Williams with a $2 super check. What cutesy RPG would you actually run or play? Well, I mean, Root's kind of cutesy, right? I mean, at least the art is. I mean, you are playing anthropomorphic animals. But of course, it's obviously, anthropomorphic animals in the sort of brutal totalitarian regime sense. Let's see, a true cutesy RPG. It's a great question. Boy. Huh. You see, the part of the problem is, like, I feel like most people who play a cutesy RPG are doing it for, like, not because it's a good game, but because they enjoy the art or the media. Like, does anybody actually want to play a cutesy RPG? I like, again, just getting off on a whole topic here about leshies, but like, yeah, I don't know. You kind of stumped me on this. I'm trying to think, in my entire RPG collection, do I have anything that's even close to resembling a cutesy RPG? No, not no, not really. I can't say that I do. I mean, Brute is probably about the closest as I'm gonna get to it. I mean, being cats and dogs and rabbits and mice, that's about the closest I'm gonna be able to do to it. I just don't appreciate non-serious, to a certain extent, storytelling, I guess. And I don't like, the ironic, I mean, it's fine for, like, I guess a one-shot, like, ironic cutesy, right? Like, Fistful of Flowers, which is the RPG Leshy adventure that we're on slated to run. you know, it's everything there is super ironic. That's like a very, I guess that's a very modern sense of humor that maybe I don't have that modern sense of humor where it's like, look how ironic it is. It's a cute little Leshy thing, but he's got a flail made of, you know, or she's got a flail of human skulls. That kind of humor. That kind of humor, not really, it's not really my favorite type. So, yeah. All right. So I don't know. I mean, probably none, really, honestly. Answer question. Well, that's it for questions. All right. So I did say, Rick S had, who's a new hero for our Discord, for our Patreon, had asked me a question. And I told him that I would answer his question on stream. So let me answer his question. All right, so Rick asked, I would like to see if you could cover how spells get heightened in Pathfinder 2. I've seen this used many times by the knights during the actual plays in the Rise of the Ruler series, and I'm a bit lost of it. I'm sure there are other people new to Pathfinder 2nd Edition that would like to learn how it works. Well, happy to answer that question, Rick. So in Pathfinder 2, you get spell slots of 1 of 10 levels. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on your character level. I know it's kind of a horrible naming paradigm, but this is very similar to 5th edition as well. This concept of heightening spells, by the way, works pretty much the same in 5th edition as well. There are most spells have an effect that increases if you cast the spell using a higher level spell slot. So the best example of this that we can use is Fireball. Fireball is a level 3 spell, which means that the lowest level that you can use a slot to cast Fireball for is level 3. And if you cast it at level 3, it does, you read the description of the spell and it says it does 6d6 points of damage in a blast. But it also says at the bottom, heighten +1 plus 2d6 damage. And that is telling you that each time you cast that Fireball at a higher level spell slot, then it can increase the damage by 2d6. So if you cast Fireball as a 5th level spell, then you are casting it 2 levels above 3rd. That means that you're going to add 4d6 points of damage, and your Fireball is now going to do 10d6 points of damage. And you can do that all the way up. And that's the case for a spell like Fireball, where it says heighten +1. There are also examples of spells that say heighten +2. Magic Missile is the clearly example of this. Magic Missile creates 1 to 3 missiles, depending on how many actions you use to cast it. But it says heighten +2. You create an additional missile for each action you spend. So if you heighten a Magic Missile to level 2, it's a level 1 spell, mind you. You could cast it at level 2, but it won't do anything different. It'll still be 1 missile per action spent. But if you heighten it to a level 3 to use a 3rd level spell slot, now when you cast that Magic Missile, it's going to generate 2 Magic Missiles for each spell action that you use to cast it. And this will go all the way up the line. So if you heighten it from 3 to 5, then you add an additional Magic Missile per action. That's 3 per action. So if you used 3 actions to cast a 5th level Magic Missile, it would do 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9 missiles. And that's 3 at 5, 4 at 7, and 5 at 9. So a 9th level Magic Missile, 5 missiles per action. If you spent all 3 actions to cast it, would generate 15 Magic Missiles. And then lastly, there are some spells which, when heightened to a certain level, have a substantially different effect. And this will be shown by, at the bottom of the spell, it'll say, instead of saying heighten +1 or heighten +2, it'll tell you the level that the spell needs to be heightened to minimally in order for it to have a different effect. Fear is a great example of this. Fear at level 1, it's a level 1 spell. It makes a opponent frightened, depending on their will save. But if you look at the bottom of fear, you will see that it says fear 3rd. And that means that if you use a 3rd level or higher, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th level spell slot to cast fear, you instead get the effect that it says in that description, which is now instead of a single target, it's multiple targets. Sleep is a 1st level spell that if heightened to level 4, and again at the bottom you'll see it says heightened 4th, has a much longer duration and a much more significant impact. So heightening is a way of using your higher level spell slots to cast your lower level spells, but with more effect, either more damage, more targets, a slightly different effect. And again, that'll all be described by the actual spell itself. Now, a couple of caveats to that is that there are 2 types of spellcasters in Pathfinder: prepared casters and spontaneous casters. Spontaneous casters, like sorcerers, they can only cast a spell at the level that they have the spell prepared in their repertoire. I shouldn't use the term prepared. They can only cast a spell at the level in which it is currently in their repertoire. So if a sorcerer has fear, level 1, is part of their repertoire, then they can only use level 1 slots to cast fear, meaning they cannot heighten it just at will. In order for a sorcerer to be able to cast, say, fear at level 1 and fear at level 3, they would need to take the fear spell twice in their repertoire. They could take it at level 1, and they can use level 1 slots in order to cast it, or they could take it at level 3 and use level 3 slots to cast it, which will have the added impact of having additional targets. Note, sorcerers do get a special class ability called Signature Spell, which allows them to pick 1 spell per spell level. So 1 at level 1, 1 for your one at your 1st level spell slot, 1 at your 2nd level spell slot, 1 at your 3rd level spell slot, that you can heighten to any level that you are capable of casting. And again, it's horribly designed because it's using 50-year-old language of level. You're talking about a game that has item level, spell level, character level, dungeon level, monster level. It's an absolutely horrible way of using a name for things. Counteract level. It's just a horrible exception. Can't they still spend higher level slots without the heightening effect? They cannot in Pathfinder 2. They could do that in Pathfinder 1, but in Pathfinder 2, you cannot just, if a sorcerer can't just use a 6th level spell slot to cast a 5th level spell. The only way that they can do that is if they have that spell as either a signature spell or they have taken that spell as their 6th level spell. I didn't really get fully into it because, by the way, there are some people who will set a spell as signature just so that they have more slots that they can use to cast it, even if they're not really getting any benefit from it. A great example of this is True Strike, which does not get any sort of benefit from being heightened, but you might take it as a signature spell nonetheless, simply because you want to be able to use your 1st level slots, your 2nd level slots, your 3rd level slots, your 4th level slots in order to be able to cast it because it's that good. So yeah. Let's see. Juan Antonidi asks, I really love Pathfinder 2, both for the system and the world, but I want more tools for the game outside combat to reduce the number of fights, or at least have more social interactions. Any advice? Well, just don't make things fight the party. I mean, that's when the party encounters monsters or foes, don't have them attack. A great example of this, I think if you watch episode, I want to say it's episode 2 of our Quest for the Frozen Flame game. The group of scouts goes to a river to gather sacred water. They see that there's some ash or poisoning in the water from a fire. And they go and investigate. And I had planned for there to be a fight with 2 water methods. And they approached them and they did not immediately engage. Hey, Rick Sherman, super chats. We'll get right to that, buddy. Thank you for the super chat. But they approached these water mephits, and they did not overtly attack. And the water mephits, we had some, there was some interaction, but dialogue between the two parties. Tim's Breck character, who's a fighter, by the way, made a diplomacy check in order to improve the creature's reaction, or attitude, I should say. And we proceeded to avoid a combat and have a dialogue instead. I mean, a lot of times, remember, the person who calls for an initiative check or a initiative roll is the GM. So if you want there to be less, you kind of set the tone there. If every time you're putting creatures into your game, you're putting them in there so that they can live and die at the swords and spells of your party members, then you're going to have a lot of combats. It also comes down to whatever it is, how you're rewarding XP. XP is the way that you show your players this is what you do to succeed at this game. So find ways to encourage them and reward them with non-combat bonuses or things like that, and people will definitely fight less. I should also say, the last part I will say, this part's a little bit tougher because this is part of Pathfinder 2, but part of the disincentive of combat historically has been that it's very dangerous and it's very deadly. When the swords came out, you're putting your character's life on the line, and resorting to violence all the time could potentially end up being very dangerous to a person's well-being. That's not as true in Pathfinder 2. Because the fighting is not as dangerous to your characters, you have a lot of hit points, and you can go to dying and then come back, and it's harder to just be punished for fighting as much. If you lose all your hit points in a fight, a couple rounds of treat wounds and you'll be back to full hit points. So consider non-mechanical consequences for fighting. You may not be able to punish the characters mechanically, but if the characters keep fighting things, have that have consequences in your narrative, in the game world. If they kill these monsters, then maybe these monsters band together, or these enemies strengthen up their defenses because the players are being aggressive. If the people they're attacking maybe aren't monsters, maybe they're just questionable humanoids. Maybe they beseech the local ruler that these brigands are a vigilante crew, right? Make them feel some sort of the pressure and the penalty and the pain that comes with just being a wanton destruction. Now, granted, you might be saying, I don't want that in my Pathfinder 2 game. I agree. A lot of people don't. A lot of people just want to kick back and roll dice and not have to deal with these kind of real world consequences. But it sounds like you're trying to create a more nuanced and more in-depth game, which you or your group might enjoy. And so those are some ideas that you might be able to take into account there. All right, Rick. Thanks, Derek. Indeed, I saw Burl use Heightened Magic Missile and Fireball several times in the later parts of the Rise of the Rune campaign, so that explanation makes some of the combat damage make more sense. Now, yeah, exactly. So Burl had Magic Missile as his one of his signature spells, and had Fireball for sure as one of his signature spells. And so Burl could use a level 3 slot, a level 4 slot, a level 5 slot, a level 6 slot in order to cast fireballs. The downside being that, when he used a level 3 slot, it only did 6d6 damage. But if he could afford a level 5 slot, then it was doing 10d6 damage. So a lot more damage there. And in the end, that's because Burl was a sorcerer and had taken those spells as signature spells. No problem, Juan. All right, scrolling back up here. Question from Chris Monroe. Curious how you would run a trial in Pathfinder 2nd Edition game, because at the extremes, it could be a lot of rolls and drawn out, or conversely, it could be hand wave with a DM summary and no rolls. I mean, do you mean like a court trial? I mean, ultimately, it really depends on how much you want to go into it. as a GM, again, you have immense power here. You could use the victory point system from the Gamemaster guide to sort of represent accruing points with the judge or the jury, making checks in order to sort of, if you want to make it more modern. Pathfinder 2 has a lot of anachronistic things in it anyways. But, you could have the players making inspired oratory and making diplomacy checks. You could have somebody lying on the stand, trying to get away with it with deception checks. You could have someone offering expert testimony in the form of, knowledge-based checks, arcana, religion, or whatever, nature. You could have someone being almost like a forensic investigator with a medicine check. If we could put the time of the death between X and Y, and each of those things could be accumulating, checks. Alternatively, you could just make it one check. But if you want everybody to kind of jump in and do their thing, I would just make it as a victory point check. And in fact, if you want to make it like kind of like one and done, if there's 5 people in your group, give everybody essentially one action, one thing that they can do at the trial. And then you basically say, and you can tell them this beforehand, say, if you guys get, a critical hit is worth 2 points, and a regular hit is worth 1 point, a failure is worth none, and a critical failure, I'm going to subtract 1. And here's the deal. If you guys can get to, 6 or more, or 7 or more points, let's say there's 4 party members. If they can get to 6 or more points, they get off, their client gets off, or they get off scot-free with the apologies of the court. If they get 4 successes total, 4 values worth of successes, then, the person is found, not guilty, or found guilty, but with like a house arrest or something. And if they get 2 successes, the person is, being sent to prison for months. And if they get like 0 successes, the person is going to be like sent to jail for years or even executed. And you can sort of just say, hey, everybody gets one action. You get to describe what you're doing in the trial. Think of it like a montage scene of what this trial is like. Then you get to make, we can role play a little bit. And then when all said and done, you'll make your roll, you'll make your check. And, maybe you can alter the DC based off of how plausible that idea is. I know it's not 5th edition, but you could give them a fortune bonus or a circumstance, in other words, let them roll 2d20. Alternatively, you could give them a circumstance bonus because it's a circumstance, that maybe they have really good evidence, or something like that. Or even if they have like drop dead killer evidence, you could say, okay, yes, I'm going to let you include that, and that's worth an automatic success, or that's worth 2 automatic successes. And then everybody gets 1 round, so it's almost like 1 round of trial combat. It's over. Like, we're not just going to keep doing this forever and ever and ever. And then you just look at the chart and say, hey, how many successes did the party get? And here's the outcome of the trial. So that's one option that you could do. Question. Have you settled on a system for your Friday night game? Great question, Ben. We have a live stream Thursday, and I was thinking about maybe talking about that then. So what has Ben talking about? Well, as many of you know, we here at the Knights of Last Call have our own private home game that we run on Fridays. We have for many, many years. This goes all the way back to junior high school. People have come and gone, but in many cases, I'm playing with a lot of the same people I was playing with in high school or when I was in college. They are still members of our group. And of course, we have new people all the time. Bob is a relative newcomer to our Friday night game. We've sort of been all over the place the last couple of years because of COVID and because 2018, I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, so it's kind of been a mess. And at one point, we were looking at the numbers, and this channel was starting to get very, a lot more successful. And we were running Abomination Vaults for the group on Fridays using Foundry, but it was too much pressure for me to be running all these games, including the Rise of Rune Lords, which used to be weekly and it was in person. And, I didn't have a routine set up yet. And so Aaron stepped in and said, hey, I'll run a game. I'll run this Dark Winter game and, all this other stuff. And I said, oh, thanks so much for that. That would be great. And I felt bad because part of the whole point of this was Aaron Smith had not been a player in almost a couple of years, it seemed like, because just the way life had worked out. And I was like, oh, I really want you to be a player, but I'm so burned out or whatever, and I couldn't do it. So we ended up playing Dark Winter for like 8 months instead, or 6 months instead. So again, he was GMing and ended up GMing a whole Pathfinder 2 campaign, accelerated, but it's a whole Pathfinder 2 campaign. And that obviously has come to an end. And we've been trying to figure out what to run for Fridays. And going back to what I originally said, I said, hey, I know he gets to play, Joran on our Quest for the Frozen Flame games, which is great. That's the first time he's being a player in a while. But, it's on, the pressures of being on the stream. And, it's not as much of it's fun to play, on live streams, but it is a very different experience if you ever get the chance to do it. There's more of a pressure there, and it could be kind of difficult. So I said, look, I'll run a game. I feel pretty confident with where we're at with the stream, and I'm fine running something for Fridays. Additionally to that, we have some friends that we've wanted to sort of include in our Friday game. So we wanted to sort of go with something a little bit more simple, a little bit more basic. So to that end, my decision, it seems, is I am going to run for a lot of these people, they have never played they did not start playing D&D until 3rd edition, possibly 2nd edition. A lot of them didn't start playing D&D, like Bob, until 5th edition. So they have never played any of the old school adventures. I'm talking B2, Keep on the Borderland, X1, Isle of Dread, T1, Temple of Elemental Evil. And Goodman Games has recently, over the last couple of years, released a series of 5th edition D&D reprints with updated content and stats and maps and a little bit more things 5th editionified. And I thought it would be a really cool experience to run this group of relatively modern gamers through some of these old games. Now, we have tried to do this in the past using BX D&D, Labyrinth Lords, Axe, that's Adventure Conqueror King system, and have been met with limited success. And I say limited success because ultimately, while I do love the old school style of play, those characters are just not mechanically very interesting to me. The monsters are not very mechanically interesting to me. I do like elements of my game to be like a game. Even in a PBTA game, which a lot of people think of as being a very narrative game, a game like Root, it has a lot of rules. There's a lot of mechanics. There's a lot of different options for your character that have mechanical weight in the game. And I appreciate that. A game like Pathfinder 2 is chock full of them, but dare I say, too much at times. And so we are going to be playing 5th edition. The problem is that there's a lot of things about 5th edition that I don't like. So our plan is to sort of cherry pick from a couple of different optional rules, as well as some of our own optional rules, to make a very, very different version of 5th edition that is more old school friendly without being, just like your character is 4 lines on a note card. And there's a supplement, which we've talked about, Ben, that you had sort of even mentioned, called 5 Torches Deep, which is a 5th editionified old school game. We're not 100% using that, but there's a lot of ideas in there that we do want to use. And so as an example for this game, we are going to use things like gold and treasure are going to be what gives you XP. We are going to be using much more significant death rules rather than the traditional 5th edition, 3 death saves and you're dead, but if you cover, all the death saves clear. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be a little bit more deadly than that. So just some ideas that we like from those games to sort of make our 5th edition game, a little bit more, actually a little bit more stripped down, because even within the 5th edition system, I don't want to use feats. I don't think that they're very good in 5th edition, and 2, again, I don't want this added level of complexity. Another example is like skills. I don't really want there to be skills in the game as such. So we are basically stripping out a lot of stuff from 5th edition, and we're going to have basically a modern version of basic D&D updated to sort of 2020 standards, and we're going to be playing through some of those classic adventures, and we're going to have fun with it. It's going to be a very beer and pretzel style game. Pathfinder 2, I would almost encourage people not to drink, if I'm running the game, because I'm like, listen, it's hard enough to play this game as it is. The last thing I need is you getting drunk and then, taking 25 minutes on your turn. Like, my goal is to have a game where turns can be over in less than a minute. That if we have 5 or 6 players, that it only takes us, 6 or 7 minutes to go around the horn. We're not going to be doing individual initiative. We're going to be doing team or static initiative. Just everything that we could do to make the game. We're not going to be using minis. It's going to be theater of the mind, that sort of thing, to keep it really, really quick, fast, and flowing. Just a very different experience from our other games. I mean, part of the thing is I'm already playing Pathfinder 2, and I'm already going to be playing Root. So I don't need to play a game that's like either of those two. I want to do something that's very different. So that's my thoughts there. K-Swistak, there's actually some things from Shadow of the Demon Lord that I would like to include there as well. The only thing about Shadow of the Demon Lord is, again, trying to avoid that Warhammer fantasy, grim, dark, horrible, like oppressive idea. I want these characters to feel like hopeful and adventurous and have a little bit of swag. I don't want them to be superheroes, but I definitely want them to be, forward thinking. And I don't want them to feel like, oh my God, like we're all just meat in the grinder. That's definitely not what I want. That's the old school experience that a lot of people associate with OSR that I actually want to kind of avoid. I want consequences to matter, but I don't want there to be this sort of fatalistic view. Not a fan of this idea, but good luck. Hopefully this is a good series for everyone else. Well, YG, good news is we will not be airing this. This is our personal private game that we play on Fridays. It's not going to be something that's even going to be part of the channel. The only actual plays that are going to be on the channel are going to be Quest for the Frozen Flame, which is Pathfinder 2 on Tuesdays. And then once we get it launched, it's going to be Root, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game of Woodland, Might, and Right. So you're in luck. But as for the idea, I don't know if you meant that you don't like the 5th edition or you don't like Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, I want a game about Dungeons and Dragons. That's kind of what I want. If that makes any sense. All right, so let's see. Any other questions? Welcome, London. Glad to see you in here. Andrew, how much success have you had with relics and other systems that grow equipment externally to the PC's choices? Great success. Terrific success, Andrew. Some of my most beloved and favorite items from both my end as well as the player's ends have been equipment that is sort of driven by the player's choices. For example, classic example of this, when we played Pathfinder 1, we played our Dragon's Delve campaign, a huge, massive 20 level plus bonus sub-level mega dungeon campaign. And early on, Tim Carpenter, who played Horus, who was a favored soul, a sort of a favored soul fighter, actually, so sort of a sorcerer cleric, melee combat person. They acquired the staff of the Titan Slayer staff, the staff of Shakaran Titan Slayer, and this staff was bound to the energies of the dungeon, and each dungeon level sort of had a unique space at the level where if Tim's character could find that location on the dungeon level and visit it there and sort of bathe the staff in the energies of that place, the staff would unlock a new ability. And so naturally, this became a huge driving force for Tim. He wanted to explore these dungeon levels. He wanted to find the missing areas because he wanted to unlock more abilities for his staff. I did something very similar to this in Abomination Vaults. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but this idea of the gauntlet in Abomination Vaults and the idea of this beam of energy which comes up from the depths, I encouraged my players to kind of explore and find that within the dungeon. And each time they did at each level, it gave them a new set of abilities to awaken or add to their characters. Because I wanted, and that was outside of leveling, because I wanted to reward them with their actions, not necessarily just because they leveled up. I wanted to put that driving force, that motivation into them to engage with the game on the level that I wanted to engage with them with, which they did too, but which was exploration. That's what I was trying to reward. I was trying to reward them for playing in my funhouse. I wanted to reward them for looking around and trying to find things. It gave them a mission. It gave them self-motivation, self-drive. And I think that if you have things like relics or things that grow, and you make the player aware of how and why and where this thing grows, you're going to find yourself with a very motivated player. And I think it's fantastic. I love it. Works very well for me. And I've always had great experiences with it, for sure. Oh, there he is. There's Horace. Hello, Jedi Dick Sensei. It's a pretty great name. Tim, there you are, buddy. Question. What is your opinion, from Mr. Damian Williams, what is your opinion of RPGs renaming classes to be general or to avoid stereotyping, i.e. champions in Pathfinder 2 or monks to adepts and others in level up? I do think that proper nouns can be problematic sometimes in games, because, you know, I'll refer to something as like, well, it's a, there's a bunch of, a bunch of rogues. Oh, are they like rogues? Well, no, they're like rogues as in they're like scoundrels. Oh, okay. So they're not like rogues as in like the class. Yeah, correct. Exactly. Got it. Okay, great. They go into an abbey or something like that. There's full of monks, like monks. You're like, no, like monks as in like, quiet, penitent members of an organization. Oh, got it. Okay. So I think it's okay. I mean, it's always going to be a little bit awkward. Maybe that's why we should just completely do away with class-based systems in generally. Just kidding. But yeah, I mean, that's fine. Do you think using incap where it only comes in for a critical failure a bad idea for boss encounters? I know there are spells, but it only has incap on a fail or worse. Yeah, I think that's fine. Also, keep in mind, I don't think it's a problem for boss fights to not be epic, and I don't think the concept of the boss fight is kind of a modern day concept. Like, imagine this. My challenge to you would be this. Imagine creating an adventure that did not have a boss. Could you do it? I think a lot of people would struggle to do that. Like, where there's an obvious boss. It doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a tough fight, but they're not necessarily the boss. So I'm actually fine with, high-level opponents or whatever being taken out. I mean, isn't that why we're playing D&D? Isn't that why we're playing D20? Because the dice can go crazy and sometimes shit happens. I don't know. It's crazy. But I think, generally speaking, incap being relegated to the critical failure is probably okay. Like, a great example of this is like the monk, the stunning fist, right? If the person fails, they're stun 1. If they critically fail, they're stun 3. Okay. But if the monk, the boss is already going to have a very high fort save compared to the monk's class DC. But with the incapacitation rule, the monk's stunning fist will never work, basically, against a higher level opponent. They they'd have to be higher level, but also have a horrible fort save and still have to roll poorly. And that's because even a failure becomes a success. But are you really that worried if the boss gets stun 1? I mean, is it a problem? Absolutely, but it's not the end of the world. It's really the stun 3 that's a problem. So just don't only have the incapacitation prevent the monk from stunning the boss 3. Because yeah, maybe that, you know, from if you're trying to play that kind of game, the boss literally being completely taken out for 1 turn just because of, you know, a bad roll. Maybe that's a little lame. But even if you make it so that if the boss, let's say they have a lower fort save, they're higher level, so, or, you know, maybe they're higher level, but they're not really strong. They're not like an extreme fort save. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah, this boss can fail on a 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 or something against your stun 1. I think that's cool. Like, that's fine, right? Like, I think that's fine. I think that's fun because now it's like, oh, the monk's like, cool, I get to stun somebody, you know, more than just, oh, there's a monster that's 3 levels lower than us, and if the fighter breathes too hard, the creature's just going to die anyways. Well, I can stun that monster because that's the monster that I'm really worried about. It's like, you don't even care if you stun that monster because it's so much lower level than you. No, the monster that you really would love to land a stun 1 on is that creature that's 2 or 3 levels higher than you. And the incapacitation rule basically makes that so that that really can't happen. But I think if you limit it, the incapacitation rule, just preventing the stun 3, which is the real problem, then letting the stun 1 stand, I think you're in a much better spot. Me personally. Any tips from Jonathan? Question: any tips for enjoying games as a player when you're usually a GM? How to be more engaged even though you're less active and enjoying GM backseating? Well, 2 things, Jonathan. I mean, number 1 is, you know, enjoy the fact that you don't have to, you know, be running all the stuff and preparing all the stuff, and just, you know, kick back and enjoy the game. And I mean, not every GM likes to be a player. A lot of reasons why some people are GMs is because they want to be, you know, they want to be in control. They want to be, you know, they want to be the big head honcho or whatever. But, you know, the other thing is, I find that, you know, I do this for Aaron. I know Aaron does this for me. Like, step up and maybe, I mean, some GMs might feel like you're coming for the throne, but like, you can sort of function as a co-GM. You know, if the GM is doing something, you know, again, it comes down to trust between your groups. I don't know what your groups are like, but like, Aaron will look something up and he'll say, you know, hey, Derek, I'm playing, right? And you go, hey, Derek, look up that rule, look up that spell. What does that do? You know, or look at that monster ability. What does that do? Because he's like offloading some of the GM stuff to me, you know, or if a player has a question, instead of asking the GM who's busy running the game and doing a million other things, they can ask me instead. And so I think it helps lower the cognitive load that, you know, someone like Aaron would have to do when they are GMing. And so I definitely think I encourage that. So, hey, I just want to say, you know, as we kind of get cruising here, as a reminder, if you're enjoying these conversations and you want to be part of the conversations 24/7, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/nightsoflastcall. Link is in the description below. That is the beating heart of the Knights of Last Call. That is where all of our ideas get discussed. It's where all of our community games and Northern Reaches games are happening. And it can be a tremendous resource to any person who is interested in taking role-playing games a little bit more seriously. I would say that we all have a bit of a problem in that we are all exceptionally passionate about role-playing games. Pathfinder 2, obviously, but the number of new games that are being explored each and every week, the number of wallets which have been emptied because of people getting excited about a new game on the Knights of Last Call Patreon is legendary. And it all kind of goes and flows through our Patreon, which has, you know, bonus videos, our Discord, and just starting last month, each month, if you're a $10 champion member or higher, we also are beginning to release PDF contents, articles, blogs, stuff for your game, advice, in sort of more of a prepackaged 10, 15, 20 page document. In fact, our first one, Dark of Winter, was sort of notes from Aaron about this Pathfinder 2 experimental campaign we ran, and I think it ended up being close to 50 or 60 pages about ways that we changed our Pathfinder 2 game in order to create a different kind of experience. So there's a lot of different tiers, a lot of different options, and I would encourage you to check that out. And Boothby coming in with a sick $5 super chat. Guys, I am almost dead, so someone is about to become the new hype boss. As a reminder, if you super chat, you do $1. $1 is 1 damage, but if you use the Stream Elements tip, $1 is 2 points of damage. That's right. If you use Stream Elements, your tips are double effective, and I can go down quick. Additionally, if someone joins the channel and becomes an adventurer, you'll deal an immediate 25 damage, which is oftentimes enough to kill the hype boss. And again, we're playing with this, but if this is fun and this is successful, we might actually change this into a game, and I don't know, maybe we'll give away prizes or unique offering. But thank you, Boothby. No question, but I need a signal boost for my Kineticist playtest session for Saturday. So this is a great example of what I was talking about. Boothby, who is giving the channel money here with a super chat, and is also one of our top tier members. Reminding you that he is in the process of running a series of different level-based Kineticist playtests. And this is all run through Foundry, all run through Knights of the Last Call provided Foundry licenses. We have dedicated Forge servers, all the resources that everyone needs. We have our Discord Maximally Boost for the best possible audio that's available through Discord anyways. Also that people could play RPGs, Pathfinder 2, Old School Essentials, the Burrow, whatever it takes to get you gaming is what we are here to do. And Boothby is in the process of running a series of Kineticist-based playtests. And if you're interested in being part of our sort of Knights of Last Call-based playtest experience, I encourage you to sign up. You can find those in the community tab of our community games and in our events section. So if you're not a member of the Patreon and you want to join up for that, well, feel free to sign up. You don't have to be a hero in order to join community games. You can just join as a squire or even as a knight, and you can get into all of our community games. If you want to join our Northern Reaches game, though, you have to be a knight, or I recommend a champion, because then you get multiple characters that you can run within the game. So hopefully we get that situation there. And YG, thank you. Keep up the good work. I love the Night School series. Yeah, YG, we love the Night School series too. Again, summer is always a crazy time. I'm the only knight who doesn't have children. And so everybody else is pretty busy during the summer. Kids are off school, holidays, vacations, parents, the whole 9 yards, plus the Rugrats running around. So my plan, we just filmed a new combat and tactics video on Sunday that is going to drop tomorrow. And I imagine that Bob and I are also going to start doing a bunch of more Night School series. Pick that up. It'll be interesting too, because Bob has been running a ton of Northern Reaches games as a GM. I think this goes subtly unsaid, but the other huge advantage about being a member of our Patreon and being a part of this community is a huge opportunity to run a tremendous number of games. If you're a new GM, if you've never GM'd, we have people who have never GM'd before, and they are stepping up to the plate. And it's a great place to do that, and I'll tell you why. One, it's a curated community. Our Discord is not public, and that means that everybody who is there is at some level paying to be there. We have a very, 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 very almost zero level of trolls, bad actors, people who are acting in poor faith. Like, the group is a very positive one. Two, most of the people there are game masters already, and there is no one better to be a player when you're a new GM than a GM, because they get it. They understand it. They're not, I'm not trying to say that all players are selfish, but all players are kind of selfish. But like a GM, a group of GMs is going to be way more understanding, patient, thoughtful, considerate, with great feedback to you, all because that is, that's how they operate. So, I think that's the net of the game. So it's a really great option. So thanks, YG. And Scratch Paper Games comes in with a $5 super chat. And Scratch Paper Games has slain the Knights of Last Call. And they are our new hype boss, which seems appropriate. Scratch Paper Games, you've been in here giving us a lot of support. And of course, we love to see it. So That's really awesome. So now Scratch Paper Games is our new hype boss. And again, we're just playing around with this, but we might create something where whoever is the hype boss at the end of a stream, gets some sort of prize or something from us. But we're just trying it out. By the way, if you are the hype boss and you tip again, it heals you. So just letting you know. I don't, Stream Elements is trying to come up with fun things to keep the stream active and interactive, and we've just been playing around. But appreciate the very witty comment there, Scratch Paper Games. Let's see. I'm going to try to go back here. We had a bunch of super chats. Thank you to everybody who donated, and thanks Scratch Paper Games for taking us over, for killing me, because I honestly just wanted to see if that even would work, and it did work. Although again, I think it's supposed to use your player icon as the little rocket ship, so I need to look into that, why that didn't update. But something to consider. Going back to what we were talking about with Stunning Fist, Total Entropy says, I think in the history of all monks, Stunning Fist has worked like once and only stunned one. Exactly. So. So YG was talking about cutting large sections of mechanics removes a level of gameness that I enjoy. Narrative, great, but I sometimes worry we can fall into improv acting. That makes it hard to take from the video. Yeah, no, I hate whatever modern day RPG, like most actual plays that you see, which are essentially just people improv gaming or improv acting. I can't stand that. Role-playing games to me are games first and foremost. And I want there to be game mechanics 100%. 100%. Uh-oh. Jason B coming in with a big tip. I turned off the sound elements. I got to turn that back on. Hold on a sec. Hold on a second here. Everything's all screwed up. All right. I had the text for speech off, but I'll have to read Jason B's tip here. He says, Jason B said, oh, goodness. Maybe he didn't. Here we go. Hey, can you please cancel your stream? Some of us are trying to... Jason B says, hey, can you please cancel your stream? Some of us are trying to run Northern Reaches game, and this is disruptive. Thanks. Jason B, don't change. Yeah, so Bob has taken it upon himself to basically run his Northern Reaches. Bob originally, he worked it out with his wife that he's free Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why? Well, Tuesdays is when we run our games, and Thursdays is when we have live streams. So Bob wanted to be free Tuesdays and Thursdays. That way he could support the live stream, be in the chat, participate with all of you. Well, Bob has been running so many Northern Reaches games for our Discord community. He only runs them on Tuesdays and Thursdays because those are the days that he has free. Well, and the son of a bitch keeps running them during my streams. And so instead of him being in here and instead of some of the people being in here, they're off playing Pathfinder 2. It's infuriating, I tell you. Thank you, Jason B. Can't believe that on someone's 5.5 wish list was to not change 90% of the game. Well, Nightish, if you ask me, that's probably on Wizards of the Coast's wish list. I mean, why would they screw up this game that they've got going here? I mean, it's hugely popular, and people are just playing the game, even if they're playing it ignoring half the rules. If you take a look, the game has changed a lot. It came out in 2015. I think the final version came out in 2015. Could have been 2014, honestly. But I think it came out 2015. I remember playtesting it in 2012, 2013 or something. The first 3 adventures were things like Horde of the Dragon Queen and Descent into... Was it Horde of the Dragon Queen? Tomb of Annihilation? Princess of the Apocalypse? Rise of Tiamat? And now, like, if you look at the last 3 games, it's things like Journey to the Radiant Citadel and romping through the Witchlight Fens and Candlekeep Mysteries. The game has radically changed. Those adventures styles, the first couple, sound like they could have been modules from the 80s or the 70s even. When D&D first came out, they were trying to basically say, hey, we know that a lot of you old school people who've been playing D&D for 30 or 40 years didn't like what we did with 4th edition. It was too modern. It was too gamey. It got away from the game's roots, which it did. We're going to go back to that. We're going to go back to, Rise of Tiamat, Horde of the Dragon Queen, right? Dungeons and Dragons. That's what the game was about. Dungeons and Dragons. And here are these character classes which look like they basically could have come out of a 2nd edition revamp. And now these adventures are very different. Journey to the Radiant Citadel has a whole section about how you can go through the whole adventure without fighting or combat. Now, do I have a problem with that? Like, fundamentally, no, but I think D&D doesn't have any sort of mechanics to support that. But that's because so many people are out there playing D&D in a way that, it's quite frankly, it just doesn't even, serve a purpose. It's kind of like the game is like it's like drapes. Drapes in your house. Drapes used to be very important because windows were, basically pieces of wood with glass in them. They were really bad at keeping out cold air. And so you had drapes, which conveniently enough, basically went around the edges of your window with thick, heavy fabric and essentially formed a sort of, form of insulation. Well, nowadays we've got really great modern windows with, double hung, double pane glass, very high R values. And in many cases, your window can even be more insulated than sections of your wall. We don't need drapes anymore because the windows don't need drapes, but people still use drapes and they just use it for its aesthetic purpose, for its window dressing. I feel the same way about D&D. I feel like a lot of groups, what they are using, they're playing D&D, but not really. Like, it's just aesthetic. They just need something that they can use as a basis or a framework to sort of crystallize their experience around, but they're not really using the mechanics of D&D. They're not really using the way it was designed. Now, will Wizards of the Coast understand that and change that? I don't know. Should they? Yeah, I think they should. I think that they should do that, but I don't think they will, because I don't think even they understand how it's possible that their game is this popular given the type of game mechanic that it is. So I don't think Wizards is going to do anything there to sort of disrupt the payday and the golden goose, for sure. So, for sure. Look at that, folks. It's Thomas Calais in the chat. Florida Tom himself. It's a buddy of mine from Cleveland. So yeah. All right. Well, Jason is currently our hype boss. I don't know if we have any other questions. I certainly didn't see. Hopefully, I didn't miss any super chats or tips. Let me know if I did. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting experience for this Friday game. One of the things that we're interested about changing up. I have a rule. I don't really like more than 4 players. 5 players is sort of my maximum. But the way that we're running this game, potentially we might bring back some old school folks. Bob's brother, Danny, is home from the Army. He's going to be joining us. We could end up with 5 or 6, potentially 7 players. I haven't played with 7 players since the early 90s, playing with my cousin when we were playing sort of a 1st edition, 2nd edition hybrid. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going for that beer and pretzel style game. Really simple characters, exploring dungeons, finding treasures, getting in over your heads, out of the frying pan, into the fire, high levels of shenanigans, really, sort of embracing that sort of, that old school aesthetic. Nothing serious, just, these characters aren't epic heroes trying to save the day. They're just, essentially just literal avatars for my players to go out and have fun and you know, kick ass and take names. And I agree with you, Damien. The old school supports more players better, for example, 100%. Hot take. Kineticists should be dismantled and defeat spells and items for everyone to take, not as a class. At most, an archetype like an Elementus. You're not going to hear me complain about that, YG. If I built my own fork of Pathfinder 2, there would be very few classes. In fact, there'd only be like 3 or maybe like 4 or 5. But like everything would essentially be broken up into archetypes. I think the archetype system is brilliant. I think it's a fantastic way. I think it's even better at increasing versatility than classes, because now screw classes. You just have all these archetypes. Now you can mix and match, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 archetypes over the course of a character's life, and take all these different abilities. And I would get rid of how much of a sort of a feat tax dedication feats are. I do think it's disappointing that they suck. Although some, like the Beastmaster dedication, are completely absurd and busted. So it's like there's no balancing there. And then I would also get rid of like the absurd, like you can't take high level feats when you take a dedication or an archetype. But yes, I agree with you. Now, obviously, the kineticist is doing things a little differently because they have this kind of system that they use. But like fundamentally, you have to ask yourself, is a class doing something fundamentally different, or is it just a style and a flavor thing? Like Ranger, Barbarian, Monk, Fighter, are they doing anything really different? No, they are all attacking and doing damage. Like at some component level, that's what their mechanics are. They get proficiencies, they get some things, and they just do damage, and that's it. We don't need 4 different classes for that. It's a sacred cow, and it's in there because, and we'll get off on a little bit of a rant here. In some ways,
Nightish tipped $15.
Nightish.
Question: what is the best system for an impromptu game? No prep, maybe even half drunk, smashing bad guys and exploring a wild imagination.
Nightish, awesome. Thank you for that $15 tip, and you are now the new hype boss. Welcome, sir. Nightish, the best system with drunk people is a very simple, stripped down, 1-page type game. Obviously, if it's a game that everybody already knows intimately, passionately, like if you had a bunch of us and we were all hanging out at NightCon and we were all drunk and we were playing Pathfinder 2, we could get away with it because we know this game so intimately well. But in terms of games that are like designed for that sort of just like pick up and play and just roll with it, John Harper has created a series of one-shot games. These are games I pull out at conventions a lot of time. Someone in chat, K Swisstack, mentioned Honey Heist, which is really good. Lasers and Feelings is another one. Lasers and Feelings by John Harper. World of Dungeons is another one by John Harper. If you want basically the most simplest, stripped down version of Dungeons and Dragons possible, you look up World of Dungeons. This is a hack of a hack of a hack. But it is essentially a stripped down version of Dungeon World designed for one-shot play, 2 to 3 hours, and I think the whole document is 2 hours. But Honey Heist is another great one. Lasers and Feelings is another one. Kick Ass Chew Bubble Gum is another one. Which I'm trying to think of the exact name of it. Oh, All Out of Bubblegum is another one, which is a very, very short role-playing game. But you could replace, in All Out of Bubblegum, you have a number of bubblegum pieces in front of you. And your character can either, and like you have eight pieces of bubblegum in front of you. And you have a D10. And your character can only do 2 things, which is chew bubblegum or kick ass. Okay? And if you want to kick ass, you have to roll over the number of pieces of bubble gum in front of you. If you want to do anything other than kick ass, let's say talk to somebody, sneak into a facility, you have to roll under the number of pieces of bubble gum in front of you. But at any time, you can eat those pieces of bubble gum. And then that makes it much easier to kick ass, but conversely, it makes it much harder for you to do anything that isn't kicking ass. And of course, eventually, if you're all out of bubble gum, your character is literally impossible to do anything that isn't kicking ass because they can only roll over the number of pieces of kicking ass. But you can use bubble gum, but I've also seen it played with shots. So you put you put 8 shots in front of somebody, and they can roll the D10, but if they want to kick ass, they have to roll over the number of shots in front of them. But they can always do a couple shots, and then then suddenly the number is much lower, and it makes it a lot easier for them to kick ass. But you do got to control. But I really love those games. I also love Lady Blackbird, but that game's a little bit more serious. But like Lasers and Feelings and World of Dungeons are perfect. I think World of Dungeons is a beautifully designed game. So I would definitely say that one. Thank you so much, Nightish, for that awesome $15 tip, and thank you for subscribing, Eduardo. You got a new hype boss. Andrew, have you ever read the Star Wars RPG that came in the square-shaped books? It's a brilliant mix and match system. Yeah, the Saga edition, Andrew. That came out at the end. There's a lot of elements in that book, Andrew, that actually kind of made their way into 4th edition D&D. It kind of came out the same time. But Star Wars Saga edition is a brilliant system. The conditions track ended up being used similarly in 4th edition, and you can still see that track system a little bit in a variant form in 5th edition with the exhaustion levels. If you ever look at the exhaustion levels in 5th edition, you say, this just feels out of place in this edition, and it's because it kind of is. It was kind of taken from 4th edition, which was taken from Star Wars Saga edition, which is the little square-shaped books that you're talking about there. So, and I thought it was a brilliant book. For sure. A lot of people like Honey Heist. Sorry to cut you off. You were talking about Sacred Cows. Damn it. I couldn't remember its subtitles. Yeah, so Nightish, what I was talking about was just that Sacred Cows classes. So, one of the things that someone talked about, posted this on Reddit. They got destroyed, of course. They came in a little bit too harsh about it, but they were basically, saying like, why do modern day adventuring parties look like, look like the cantina at Mos Eisley? Why do they look like it's a bunch of monsters instead of a bunch of, characters? Like, it's one thing for the creature, it's one thing for the Fellowship of the Ring to have some hobbits and a dwarf and an elf, and then some humans. Okay, there's some racial differences, but it's another thing if the Fellowship of the Ring is like an ent, an orc, a wraith that is now somehow good. I don't know, Shelob's younger cousin, right? Like suddenly the game looks a little bit silly and different. And the person was being a little bit of a troll about it, but they got destroyed on Reddit. But it still raises an interesting question, and I think I've said this before, which is that, and I've said this, and I'm not trying to be mean way. I think people really undersell. I think people not undersell. I think people want to make a unique character, and they don't know how. And so they look to things like classes, and they look to things like ancestries or races, and they figure if I have enough weird ancestries and enough classes to shake a stick at, then my character is automatically unique in default. Because imagine a game where there was only 3 classes and 3 races. Let's say the races were human, dwarf, elf, and the classes were warrior, expert, caster. That's it. A lot of people would look at that and go, but how do I make my character unique? Well, the same way that you make yourself unique. I'm a human employee, right? Just like 5 billion other people. How do I make myself unique? By my goals, my passions, my hobbies, my interests. That sounds like a lot of work for a role-playing game. People just want to be able to like rubber stamp their character's uniqueness. They want to be able to just say, oh, I'm a Tengu gunslinger, or I'm a Leshy kineticist. I'm a, you know, God help me, hobgoblin medic ranger, right? Like the sense, basically the sense being that if you take enough archetypes and enough classes and enough ancestries with heritages, you eventually get to such a law of large numbers, right? Like 30 times 50 times 40 times 30, you eventually arrive at a combination that there are so many, it's like a phone number. There are so many different combinations that you eventually reach an absurd level where it is statistically likely that no one has ever been what you are before. And people can go, ah, look at me. I'm unique. And that's what they want. But they don't want to have to earn it, and they don't want to try to play it. They just want to be unique by default. And it's really a tragedy because, and I've said this before, so I'm not saying anything new here, but like people go, oh, Derek hates Leshies because they're cute. No, I don't like Leshies because of what I think they represent to a lot of people. A lot of people want to basically be like, you know, oh, look at me, I'm a Leshy. That means I'm interesting. That means I'm funny. That means I'm cute. That means I'm an outsider. That means I'm a maverick. That means I'm irreverent. They use the ancestry as like just a coat of paint as aesthetic. They don't actually lean into anything that would make them be like a Leshy. And I think that itself is actually interesting. What if I was playing as, what if I, me, Derek, what if I was an awakened, sentient being that it was derived from the very natural spirit essence of the world, a creature that lived and breathed the Earth's, you know, life force. I would be so alien and so different from anything close to a human or a dwarf or an elf or a gnome. But people pick them and they just do it for what? The stats and a racial power and like some funny art that they get commissioned off of Fiverr. I think they just sell the whole concept incredibly short. And I'm picking on Leshies here, but I mean, the same could be true of elves. In some ways, I do have a problem with elves being played in the game. Elves are almost ageless beings. Yeah, sure, they have, you know, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 arms, 2 legs, but the way that they should view things and the way that they perceive things should be so markedly different from the way that any human sees it. And at the end of the day, most people play their humans and their elves and their dwarves and their Leshies and their hobgoblins and their Tengus as humans. They just play them like humans. They just wanted the cool, unique stamp. They wanted some racial power that was busted. I think that is a travesty. And that is why I say I think people should just be humans. If you're going to play your character like a human, they should just be a human. Boothby, that's a great question as well. You know, it actually raised an interesting question, Boothby, that we used to talk about, which was, is a paladin courageous? Because if a paladin is immune to fear, you know, you can almost think of that like, you know, Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, who didn't have emotions and so was incapable of feeling fear. So, you know, there's a very dangerous situation. Data goes in there. Is Data brave? Is Data courageous? Like, no, like the definition of being brave is being afraid and doing it anyways. Like if you are immune to fear, you can't really be brave. Obviously, you know, we're taking it a little step further. You know, immune to fear means like fear effects. It doesn't necessarily mean that they literally cannot process the emotion fear, but it is interesting how that works. Ian, I think that the rules don't really support treating an ancestry as a new culture. Not like Tolkien with clearly defining cultures between hobbits, elves, and humans. I agree. And quite frankly, I mean, when there's that many different ancestries at the table, you know, we played with somebody who was like, for like 4 or 5 levels, who was a Tengu. And I honestly, I never remembered that they were a Tengu. Only when they would make a really bad bird pun would I remember that their character was supposed to be a bird person. But at no point did I ever feel like that person was playing a bird or that had any influence on the way that they play their, you know, character. So yeah, character age is another big one. I mean, the starting age for elves in a lot of games is like hundreds of years old already. So yeah, it's just a weird thing. And I get it. It's a role-playing game. We're not supposed to take these things so seriously. But then I just question why all these ancestries are here to begin with. And again, I think the reason why all these ancestries are here to begin with is because people want to be able to sort of just peel off the sticker of an ancestry and peel off the sticker of a class and stick it on their character sheet and say, look at how interesting and unique my character is. Yeah, we got another super chat from Scratch Paper Games. An ancient elf might see a wise old human as an average elf youth. Exactly. 100%. They, you know, they're, you know, and again, part of the fun of a role-playing game, I think, is challenging your perceptions. I mean, I'm not going to get like super, you know, I'm not going to get super off on the beaten path here, but like Monster Hearts, which of course is a game that I have discussed many times. Monster Hearts, which, you know, 2 editions. And, you know, Monster Hearts is a PBTA game about being secretly being a vampire or a werewolf or a ghost or a ghoul or something in high school. But the author of Monster Hearts, in the first edition of Monster Hearts, was Joe McDalno, and then by the second edition, Joe McDalno had transitioned, and she now goes by Avery Alder. And Avery, has talked about and written about a lot about how the metaphor of being a monster was very important to her as a metaphor for what it was like to be trans and to have this feeling that you were in a body that you didn't belong in, that you didn't control, that you had these emotions and these feelings that weren't necessarily something that it felt like you, but it felt different. And it was very, very similar to like being a werewolf and having this beast within you, this rage, but it wasn't you, but it was you. And like, should you embrace it or should you, you know, deny it? And so the struggle of playing these things for Avery was a metaphor for, and you know, especially at a pivotal time in your life, like say high school, was a metaphor for the struggles of gender identity. And I kind of knew that going into playing this game, and yeah, it was very eye-opening to me. I have not struggled with gender identity in my life, but I can say that playing Avery's game made me maybe not understand, because understand is a very complicated concept, but it made me appreciate that struggle, and it made me appreciate that freedom that can come with finding your identity and making peace with it. Because through this role-playing game, through putting myself in the shoes of a vampire who is in high school, of being a ghost who just wants to go to prom, but you know, can never have a kiss. Like those really leaning into that changed my outlook on real life, changed my outlook, I think for the better. And so role-playing games can be tremendously transformative. And even if it's not something as serious and as important as like understanding and becoming a better person, I also think it's tremendously freeing and fun and liberating to just kind of say, I am going to divorce myself from myself, and I'm going to lean in to playing and acting and being a certain way. And I think that could be really, really fun. So, yeah, I think role-playing games are great. And I think, a lot of people shortchange them by just, playing like that. Dave, getting back to the questions here. Dave, what systems would you recommend for a superhero RPG? I have fond memories of playing Marvel's Face Rip system. Well, that's a great question, Dave. Depends what you're looking for. If you want something that is like the Pathfinder 2, that's kind of crunchy, well, okay, let me reverse that. All of the games I'm going to suggest have a fairly strong narrative element to them. But there are 3 that I have played a lot and I like a lot. Okay. One I've played an absolute ton, and the other one I have played just a couple times, but I think it's fantastic. The first one is a game I've only played a couple of times, but I think it's really great. It is Masks, which is by Magpie Games. It is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So that means it's a very narrative-focused game. It's not about detailing what your powers do exactly. It's not about, breaking everything down. But it is a game that is really going to, kind of in a similar way, in fact, it's inspired by Monster Hearts. Masks is about a young team of superheroes struggling with the identity of being a superhero, and about having to balance the responsibilities of being so powerful with also being a young teen. If you enjoy Spider-Man, especially the newer movies, if you enjoy the Young Justice cartoon series, the Teen Titans, if you like that kind of style of comic book hero, where the characters' struggles are they need to stop Deathstroke from a plot to blow up the city, but they also need to ask Rachel Woods to the prom, and those are like the 2 big dilemmas in their life. Or ask Mary Jane out, and also stop Mysterio. If you like that kind of game, Masks is by far the best. The other 2 games are both by Steve Kenson, and they're both from Green Ronin. One is called Icons, which is a short, simple, sweet role-playing game, very low complexity, but lots of fun, very good for like 1-shots and 2-shots. And then the creme de la creme, the game that I've probably played more than any other game, aside from probably D&D and Pathfinder, is Mutants and Masterminds. Now, Mutants and Masterminds is a more complex game. It's D20 based. It's got strength, dex, con, int, wiz, charisma, the whole 9 yards. Fort save, reflex save. But Mutants and Masterminds is a very, detailed game. Like, you're going to I'm going to take the flight power and I'm going to give it 3 ranks. And that's going to mean that I can fly at 1,000 miles per hour. But if I put a 4th rank into flight, I can now move at 3,000 miles per hour. And this is my blast power. And this is my energy shield power. And this is my levitation power, right? It's a very, very precise game. So if you like all the points and the counting and, the mechanics, Mutants and Masterminds could be a really great game. But if you want something a little bit more freewheeling and fun and quick, I would choose Icons or Masks. So. Apparently I missed a question. Copy-paste question. What systems and modules would you recommend as a first foray into OSR? The thing that I'm looking for is quality procedural support for going dungeoning. Well, it's a great question. So B2, Keep on the Borderlands, was originally it's a very basic adventure. It is based around the Caves of Chaos, which is sort of a rocky ravine that has like 8 or 9 or 10 caves that, hey, thanks, Sean, for the super chat. I'll get to that in 1 second, buddy. Thanks so much for the super chat. Caves of Chaos, it's like 8 or 9 caves, each one with different monsters in it, going up in level as the PCs go up in level. It's pretty basic. But it was designed and published to be inside of the beginning box set, the basic box set. And so there's a whole section in there about how to run and play a dungeon. and how to, approach that. I think B2 is fantastic. But I also say if you want an OSR experience, but something a little bit more modern, even into 5th edition, there's 2 3rd edition modules, which got reprinted for 5th edition in the Tales from the Yawning Portal book. And they are Sunless Citadel and they are Forge of Fury, which are 2 of my favorite adventures of all time. They're fairly basic, but they are dungeon crawls. For Sunless Citadel is pretty linear, I will admit, but it's a good training wheel. But Forge of Fury, I think, is one of the best adventures of all time. When I was on Roll for Combat, they asked me what my favorite adventure of all time is. I said Forge of Fury. It's a fantastic adventure. Now, you mentioned, how do I learn procedural dungeon playing? Well, that is a little bit trickier. And this is where some of the things that we want to produce, K-Swiss Stack, I could tell you, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but right now Aaron is working on a article which is going to be released, we hope this month, as part of our Patreon bonus for our champion tiers or higher, talking about random encounters and information and how to build random encounters and how to use random encounters and how to bring random encounters into your game. We want to take sort of the part of our Patreon and sort of explore some of these ideas. But there are some resources out there that can already be very useful. One of them, if you Google this, if you look up Matt Finch, Old School Primer or Primer, it should be the first thing that comes up. There's a million versions of it. It's a PDF. But Matt Finch, Old School Primer is a fantastic way to sort of get a little bit of information about how those kind of games worked and how they sort of feel and how they sort of play out. But I also think that B2, Keep on the Borderlands, is where so many young people in the early 80s got their start. And again, it's a very short mod. I think it's only 32 pages. But like the first couple of pages about it are really just about, hey, this is how a dungeon works and this is how people should map and this is how a game should go. Part of the challenge is unlearning what you have learned. So there is definitely a skill to that. But, K-Swiss Stack, maybe that's something that we can talk about more here on this channel. I know we talk a lot about Pathfinder 2, but I think that there's value in talking about some of these older concepts as well, because I think it's a tremendously fun way to play the game, and it's one that definitely deserves some love and attention. Sean, Forged in the Dark campaign when? Sean, that's very tempting. It's one of my favorite systems of all time, certainly to run. I've only played in Forged in the Dark games as one-shots at Gen Con. I've never actually been a player in an ongoing game. And by the way, Forged in the Dark games, in my personal opinion, should never go for more than 20 sessions. I really don't think that there's value in that. I think the game works best in like a 4 to 6 to maybe 12 session type game. But man, it is so wonderfully beautiful to run as a game master. I love the conversations that you have in Forged in the Dark games about establishing position and effect, that sort of back to making sure that everybody's on the same page and getting that constant collaborative feedback. Sean, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I will say, Sean, that one of the things I want to do with the Patreon, we've talked about doing this. I've avoided doing this because, well, it just felt weird to me. But a lot of other content creators on the internet have tiers at their Patreon in which they essentially will run games for patrons. I have avoided doing that because by the time I was ready to run games for the Patreon, we had so many people and I didn't want to be unfair. But the plan is to establish some sort of system of tickets or currency that you can accumulate. And then when these games open up, let's say when I'm running a Forged in the Dark game, the people can buy their way in. And for people who have enough tickets or have enough high enough tier, and possibly even some of these like little mini campaigns, I would love to do that. I don't know that I would air it because we're already airing so many actual plays. And between me and you, Sean, actual plays from a financial standpoint, unless you're like Dimension 20 or Critical Role, really aren't worth it. There's so much money that goes into a good quality production to even make it bearable, I think, to watch and listen to, that by the time you calculate, and then if you're being respectable, honest, forthright business person like I'm trying to do, you're also paying your players. And so by the time I've paid my players, paid my production costs, like you have to earn hundreds of dollars in tips just to break even on an actual play. So running an actual play is kind of a loss for a channel. But in terms of a private game, I think that is much more appealing to me. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, I'd love to run it and watch people experience it and see it and have fun with it. But, we only get so many live streams a month, and, we have to use the live streams that are going to generate income for the channel so that we can keep this going and make sure that I have the funds to justify spending this much time on the channel, and also make sure that I can, pay people. And, we had a really great month in July. I was able to give Bob and Aaron some extra money for all the hard work that they've put into the channel, into Northern Reaches, and into, releasing videos. And that felt great. And I definitely would love to keep that going. And so that's kind of the plan. But anyways, going off on a tangent there. Sorry about that, Sean. Mr. Williams, $5 super chat. The Basic Heroes Handbook is the way for newbies to get into M&M, but Sentinel Comics is best. Yes, Mr. Williams has talked to me about Sentinel Comics. I have not read that RPG, so I do not want to say anything good or bad about it, but it seems like I'm sure it's a reasonable RPG. But yeah, Basic Heroes Handbook, which is also Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition, is the best way to get into M&M for sure. Even if I kind of like 2nd edition Mutants and Masterminds better, but. Anthony, after running Sunless Citadel, I wasn't a huge fan, to be honest. Never ran Forge of Fury though. Well, that's a shame. If I would be curious why you weren't if you weren't a fan of Sunless Citadel because it's a linear hallway disguised as a dungeon, I would understand that. But
Nightish tipped $15. I heal.
Yes, Nightish, you are correct. You did heal. Thanks for Nightish. Thank you for thank you for the tip, but also thank you for making sure that setting is on and correctly works. So appreciate that, and keeping yourself topped off there at 32. Very nice. But see, this is the idea, Nightish, and maybe we'll figure out some prize or something like that. But going forward, we'll have some more formal definition of something that people can win by being the hype boss at the end. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Obviously, there's an incentive for me as a channel. It's a great way for me to encourage everybody to tip and donate and stuff like that. But which I'm sure, of course, everybody wants to anyways. But if there's a little bit more interactivity that we can add to it as well, so much the better. I adapted Forge of Fury 2nd edition to increase the level and can agree that it's excellent. Yeah, Forge of Fury is incredible. I love it. It's so good. Swisstack, regarding unlearning habits. Yeah, first 2 sessions I ran of Blades in the Dark were pretty rough because I had to unlearn so much from D&D 5e. Yeah. This is something that I take for granted because I had so much exposure to non D&D games even as a young lad. And in fact, one of the games, it's all the way up there. One of the games that I started playing when I was in high school, I was probably only 15 or 14 when I first played the Dragonlance Saga dramatic storytelling game, which was a game that used a deck of cards, and you had a hand of cards instead of dice. There was no dice in the game, just cards, and you played cards, and you knew what, the value on the card was essentially kind of like what your die roll was, but you knew what it was going into it. So as a character, you could basically say, I'm going to succeed at this, I'm going to fail at this. You knew playing the card that you were going to fail with it. So it was about like picking your moments to be dramatic and finding your moments to be the hero. We played that at such a young age that I think it just sort of warped my sense. And so by the time I found games like Blades in the Dark and stuff, for me, it was a natural pickup. But I agree. There are a lot of habits that we acquire as D&D 5e players or Pathfinder players that can be problematic to the way that you run Blades in the Dark, for sure. I also had the advantage that I got to play it with people who in some cases, designed the games or were part of the original playtesting crew. So they really kind of had been, they knew how it worked. And so I got to see it firsthand. Faction clocks are amazing. Action downtime sequence of events is by far my maybe not my exact favorite mechanic of RPG history, but it's close. I don't. Every time I play Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy or any other Blades in the Dark hack, my players play for the downtime. It's like they have these goals that they are trying to reach, and they need money and they need resources. And so they are out there doing scores or running jobs or doing heists because they want to be able to advance their agenda. And they have plans. They have big plans. And they can use that sort of cycle of downtime and score and problems. And of course, while they're doing, scores and heists, and while they're, achieving their goals, there's fallout from that, right? Some people are happy with them. Some people are not happy with them. And that creates consequences. It's never as simple as just, they go to work and then they get their money and then they buy what they want to buy. That's what would happen for, you and me and everybody else and our regular folks, but not for a scoundrel, not for a no good thief. Anthony, you also don't know how good actors the patrons are. If you were going to release videos of those games. I see what you're saying. Well, Anthony, the other side of that is there's a certain amount of there for liability, releases, and getting people permission, and doing things with the videos. And I'm not saying that can't be done, but it's something that I am aware of, and I want to be respectful of and careful with. So, that's the key case with Stack. Just go find a bunch of professional actors and film my games with them. I was a player in the 5e Keep on the Borderlands, and I wasn't a huge fan. Total Entropy, I'd love to hear more about it and why that was. I have some ideas of why you probably didn't like it, but again, I will also state it's not for everyone, but my guess is that you're probably going to tell me a story that I'm going to make me say that they were doing it wrong, that the GM was doing it wrong, the DM was doing it wrong. Any resources, videos, podcasts you'd recommend for learning Blades in the Dark? There is, God, what is their name? Damn it. There is a person, and now I cannot remember their name. Well, for starters, if you look up on YouTube, John Harper, I think himself, has run Blades in the Dark on YouTube. So if you look up John Harper, Blades in the Dark actual play or whatever, that's the person who created the game. So, on the other hand, if you see someone like Z Bashu, who created an absolutely horrible video, completely missing the point of Blades in the Dark, that's absolutely horrible. So you need to avoid that. Is it this person? Nope, it's not this person. There is, I follow them on Twitter, and now I can't remember their name, but there is a fantastic person who runs Blades in the Dark style games, and I just can't remember the name of them. But the truth of the matter is, Shadram, it's a pretty small niche game. So no, it's not Jared Logan. It's just because I'm on the stream and it's a mind blank. But there is an SRD for Blades in the Dark, so you can definitely check that out. The PDF is also fairly inexpensive. And so, yeah, it definitely is something to check out there. But it's, I'm going to see my Twitter. I just can't remember the name of this person. Darn it. Well, if I ever think of it, I'll let you know. Yeah, John Harper. I mean, he's the guy who created the game, Shadram, so he's the person to go. From my experience, it was just a bunch of random encounters and events, and we all just got one shot by an ogre. I didn't have a problem with us all dying, but I wasn't upset that it was over. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, getting one shot by the ogre could absolutely happen. But I think that the key with old school play is you have to put the players in charge. You have to let the players know what they're getting into. The difference between players taking a knowledgeable risk and then failing and then dying even, and the players just getting suddenly swept up into a random encounter and they're dead. The difference that could create on a person's experience and the difference that can create on a party could be tremendously different. And again, I mean, I don't want to get too much into this, but like one of the things that I always do, Aaron always does, like with things like random encounters, is I try to a certain extent to have the players be aware of what could be potentially at risk. I remember we were playing an old school game, and the group had made camp for the night along a sort of riverbed, at the edge of a riverbed that was mostly running pretty low. So there's a lot of stones. You know, it's like a small stream, a creek, but the river was running pretty low. So a lot of stone gravel areas. And they thought it would be great because it would be easy to hear people approaching them. And they found a small copse of trees at the edge of the bank, and they kind of set up camp inside of it. And what they didn't know was that this valley was populated, had a group of Medusas. And they ended up getting a random encounter, and they ended up encountering 2 Medusa. Now, to be fair, they ended up winning this somehow, and including several people making saves versus petrification, so they did not turn to stone. So it was a incredible, crazy fight. But, you know, there was a little bit of like this kind of like moment where everybody was kind of eye rolling and kind of being like, ugh, like this is basically a TPK. We have no chance. Now, granted, the fact that they ended up winning was incredible. I mean, they made it like 10 times better. But I could have Lance. Okay, this was an axe. Okay, Lance was there for this. So yes, this was Adventure Conqueror King, which is an old school retro clone. But I could have done a much better job in that encounter if I had sort of given the players some sort of information about the risk that they were taking by being in that valley. It's one thing, and even if you say, oh, there's only a 5% chance of Medusas. Maybe it's a rumor that they hear in town, or they see the sign of a broken statue. But if they take that risk knowingly, and then the Medusas show up and maybe they kill everybody and turn everybody to stone, even though that was random dice, it's kind of the player's fault. And I promise you that the experience is a lot different than just being like, we had no control over what anything was happening and then we were dead. And what you described, Total Entropy, sounds like that, Absolutely, the difference is foreshadowing. Absolutely. The difference, Total, is knowledge, right? I've talked about this before on the stream all the time. And by the way, I'm not perfect at this. I'm always trying to get better at this. But player agency is the ability for players to make actual choices that they can actually make, that can actually take. And those choices have to be at least somewhat informed, because if the players are choosing, you go, well, it's not a hallway. They can go left or right, and they do actually lead to completely different places. That's only part of giving players agency. They also have to understand somewhat what's behind door number 1, what's behind door number 2, because if they don't have any information, then it's not really a choice, So giving the players a choice, but then not giving them any information is the same as basically giving them no choice. And so in this particular instance, yeah, I think the issue, it's foreshadowing. It's letting characters with abilities give the players, knowledge that they can use to make better decisions. The ranger or the druid sees tracks. The wizard or the dwarf sees strange stone that doesn't look like natural rock. And you realize it's a shattered statue, it's old and the trails, but you're like, oh, okay. So maybe there is something about, maybe Medusas were here, but they're not here anymore or whatever. Like, you're immediately giving the players information, and then they can, they can act on that. They can react on that. So one of my favorite things to do with like random encounter tables is I let the players essentially, eventually gain information about what's on the random encounter table. In fact, I even let them do things like, if my random encounter table has like a bunch of ogres on it, if the party goes and finds an ogre den and they kill all the ogres, I will like erase the ogres from the random encounter table. I'll make sure that they know that that's what happened. And the players suddenly realize that before, if I had rolled a 45 to 55, that they were going to be encountering 1d6 ogres. But now if they roll a 45 or 55, it's just no encounter. Like, they feel like they have changed the world, and for the better. They're like, we didn't want to just randomly stumble across ogres in the middle of the night, or maybe when we were returning to town, licking our wounds, out of spells, low on hit points. But now we've taken matters into our own hand. We chase those ogres down. We put them to the sword, and now they're not even on the random encounter table. It gives you this sense of control over your environment, and that's what people want, right? They want to be able to make choices that actually change the outcome of the game for them. And that's why I think, well, if any of this sounds interesting, trust me, this is just the surface level. Aaron is putting together a pretty nice document, treatise primer on random encounters with a lot of great information that he's going to be releasing to our champion tier and hero tier members later this month. So a great example of trying to codify some of the information that we have and we use. Good evening, Mr. Palmer. You caught us here right at the end of the night. We have time for another question or two. Obviously, if somebody wants to come in and tip, I will be happy to answer your question. But I think we'll probably call it 2 hours. We've been doing last couple of weeks. We've been doing these big 4-hour streams. So I will ask this. I don't even know how many people are in here. 32. We have a stream Thursday. All Spells Ranked is over. We've had a lot of questions about what to do with those Thursdays. And if you're a patron and you have some thoughts, if you have some ideas that you would like to see, let me know. Because it's just a new opportunity for us to talk about other games, different games. Obviously, Pathfinder 2 is good for the stream. It gets us a lot of views and gets us a lot of attention, but there are other games I'd be happy to talk about. At some point, I need to talk about Root, because we're going to be playing that. Homebrew Thursdays. I don't know if that second H was supposed to be there, but that's kind of funny. Total Entropy. Regarding the champion tier docs, do latecomers get access to past docs? Total Entropy, great question. We are working on that right now. Hey, take care, Don Pokey. We will see you later. Thanks, buddy, for the kind words. Appreciate you. Right now, we have our Dark of Winter campaign, and this month we are supposed to have our Random Encounter Part 1, Random Encounters Part 1 document. We are going to have to come up with some sort of system, because eventually we want to create a system where if someone joins a year from now, they don't just get the benefit that everybody else who's been paying every month will get. We will probably, as part of our high-level tiers, we'll gain these sort of tickets that you could use to get into exclusive games or exclusive merch giveaways, but we'll also probably let you use those to purchase with your sort of KOLC bucks past PDFs. They might also be available for a fee, maybe at a discount because you're already a champion or a hero, if you did miss out on them. But eventually we are going to have to lock that down. So
Steven tipped $15. 2 is great. So much collaborative narrative only limited by creativity.
Yes, Steven, exactly. I can't, I mean, PBTA, it'll change the way you run your games. It'll open your eyes to what a role-playing game can be. And here's the thing, even if you say, you know what, I miss minis and flanking and tactical combat, which is totally acceptable, by the way. I like those things too. I don't want people to think that I don't. I do. But even after you play PBTA, you're going to find yourself going, I kind of want to put some of that into my Pathfinder 2 game. I really love this idea of the players being more engaged. Because I can promise you right now, if you're watching this, if you're here at home, I think we all know that as GMs, the one thing that we wish, that we want more than anything is we want it to be a conversation. We are putting so much out, but it can feel like a lecture at times, right? It feels like we are just preaching to an audience, which sometimes may or may not even be receptive. And we really sit there and we doubt ourselves. We say, am I getting through to this? Is this fun for them? Are they actually participating? I'm not getting anything back. It's like going on a really bad first date where you're like, okay, well, I'm doing all the talking and they aren't saying anything. And playing PBTA and playing some of these games that really require players to kind of step up and maybe understand that it is a conversation between players and game masters. It can just change the way that you approach playing role-playing games. It can make it a remarkably different experience for everybody involved, even if you take those principles and take them back to, say, Pathfinder 2, which I think you should. Because just because I want to play with minis and grids and flanking and, stacking aid bonuses so that I can, do sick crits, doesn't mean that I want to stop having like a fun back and forth between myself and my players, or myself and my game master. Buying KOLC bucks to purchase KOLC loot boxes. I will say this, Total Entropy, it was discussed in jest, but it was discussed. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, Total Entropy, there are things that we want to be able to provide to our community, but we are limited. We're not a full-time operation. Myself, Aaron, Bob, we only have so many hours a week that we can put into the stream. If we do certain things, we can't do print runs of merch for, 2,000 people. So in certain instances, we're really going to have to limit things. And if we have to limit things, unfortunately, it means that we need a way to decide who gets them and who doesn't get them. And that's where some form of KOLC bucks or tickets comes into play. So, let's see. Case Swiss, one of the things on the stream could be the changes you're doing to 5e to 5e for the Friday game you mentioned to get some of those juicy zeitgeist fueled views. Yeah, Case Swiss, that might be a fun way. Also talked about Anthony, but we're not actually doing. Awesome. Well, it's 9:00, and I think we've answered all the questions. I want to thank everybody who stepped in today and made sure that the hype boss is working. Nightish managed to hold on there with a heal to keep him in the game, which is interesting. And like I said, I definitely want to come up with a situation where oh no, hello. But sorry, we got the horrors coming in. There we go. Can't wait to see how the raid boss meta develops. Yes, congrats Nightish for holding on to the very end. You have my everlasting thanks for keeping that title, including your sick little heal there to keep you on top. Although Steven did come for you there at the end, but you managed to cling on just barely. But maybe we could ping me on the Discord, Nightish, and I'll throw you a hero point or two, just for playing along and for having fun. Appreciate it. But yeah, going forward, we're gonna come up with something. We can have some fun with this, and again, I'm open to ideas. I love being able to interact with you all, and it makes it so much more fun than just sitting here and recording videos, just talking with like a script, the way that, it's so boring. I much prefer this interaction, the chat, being able to go back and forth. It's so much better fun. If you want both narrative and tactical, you should check out the playtest for Icon from the Lancer devs. Though the narrative system is Forged in the Dark rather than PBTA. Well, I love Forged in the Dark, so that's not like a problem either. But okay, I'll check it out. I've heard a lot of good things about Lancer. Was not aware of Icon. So K-Swiss Tech, I will check that out. That sounds pretty cool. I'm definitely interested. All right, everybody. I think that is going to do it. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me tonight and for being part of this. We'll be back Thursday with another live stream. I'm not sure yet what we're going to exactly talk about, but it might be a little bit more... We'll try to, it'll be a little bit more focused than just a GM. It could be about 5e and the changes that I'm making to it. So why I'm making them and what house rules I'm going to include because of the type of game I want to play, just because that's been so top of my mind lately. But I'm also not opposed to talking about some house rule ideas that I've been sort of thinking about for Pathfinder 2 as well. And if I could ever figure out how to use InDesign properly, would eventually try to make some sort of document that I can hand out to all you fine folks. Well, at least all you fine patrons. Thanks a lot. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, click the bell to be notified. We are through our summer season, so we're going to hopefully get back here to producing at least a couple videos a month on top of our 2 live streams a week. And, of course, can't say enough about our Patreon, patreon.com/nightsoflastcall. Check us out, link in the description. All the benefits, depending on the tier, extra videos, extra PDFs, access to the Discord, community server games, Northern Reaches, yada, yada, yada. It's crazy. It's amazing. Is Quest for the Frozen Flame next week? No, Quest for the Frozen Flames is the 30th. 23rd is supposed to be Root. But at this point, I am only like 50% sure that Root is going to happen because getting the studio set up by myself has been a lot more work than I expected it to be. Bob has been super busy being super dad as his kids get ready to start school, and his wife's had a bunch of family members and family reunions, and Bob's been being a super dad, super husband. So I have not had his aid. Also, he's been running too many damn Northern Reaches games. So, but we'll see about Root. I'll let everybody know what's going on with that. But Quest for the Frozen Flame is the 30th. So. Don't need to know. I'm doing pretty good. I'm happy. It's Tuesday. We're making our way towards the weekend, and I'm excited to play some role playing games as one would be. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and we'll see you Thursday on Nights of Last Call. Peace.